My school bag was like a pharmacy going through high school with injections and inhalers and pills. And then when I started college, the asthma started. And then when I started working, in the movie business, the IBS started, and then the chronic back pains. And it's funny, it wasn't until I sat down and I kind of made a record of all these things, I thought, oh my gosh. I never thought of myself as a sick person. It was just things you have to deal with, allergies and, back pain. Everybody gets that, right?
The fear was building, the anxiety was building. And it got to the point where I would eat, and it was like eating glass. It was so painful.
And we put food in like you described. And that's why it feels like broken glass, or it feels like we're allergic to everything. Because then it's like you're putting food into a system that is on strike.
So when people are like, my neck is killing me, oh my gosh. And I work with a couple of clients like that. And we fix the breathing, we fix that sympathetic versus parasympathetic state. We relax how they're using their mind. The neck issues tend to go away.
And I think that's why my pain went away, is because, like you said, when the mind slows down, my body didn't need to scream at me anymore.
You might be expecting this podcast to discuss hot baths, meditation techniques, and breathing exercises. But really, those are only just pressure releases, and they don't fix the true cause. The true issue is a contracted mind. And a contracted mind creates stress, upset, frustration, and impatience. A relaxed mind creates inspiration, connection, fresh ideas, and solutions to intractable problems. We're going to explore how you can relax into presence. This is the Releasing Mental Tension podcast with Rich Life. If you struggle with pain, this is such an important conversation that you need to listen to. I used to struggle with pain when I was going through the biggest breakdown of my life. And I found an understanding that really helped me. My guest today also found this understanding, and it really helped her, where she went from having to go to the chiropractor, being on the floor with painful back where she couldn't even move, to just having little aches and pains here and there, but thriving. So if that sounds like something you would like to explore, join me for this episode of the Releasing Mental Tension podcast. I have a great guest. Her name is Chana Studley, and she has 4 books, it looks like, so far. Her latest one is Beyond Diagnosis, a paradigm shift from pathology to innate health. And we're going to be talking about innate health today. I read Painless. It was a really wonderful book, and I got a lot out of it. We'll be talking about that as well. And she survived 3 violent muggings. She recovered from severe PTSD and went on to have a successful Academy Award-winning career in Hollywood. Welcome, Chana. Thanks for joining me today.
Really great to be here with you. Thank you.
And it sounds like you had an experience and a history with pain. I'm thinking the Painless is kind of like a made-up story, but it seems like it's borrowing a lot from your history. Because it sounds like you went to chiropractors, you struggled with constant chronic pain, but then you found an understanding that helped you find freedom from that in a lot of ways. Tell me more about your history.
Yeah, it's funny. My pain journey felt like it started in my 20s when I had all these, I experienced a lot of violence, and I got a lot of injuries. My skull was fractured, my neck was broken. I mean, thank God not the spinal cord, but the vertebrae at in your neck at the base of my skull, and then three herniated discs. And that those injuries kind of, at least I thought, caused me a lot of chronic pain for about 25 years. I would have these pain flare-ups in my back where I was bent sideways. I had sciatica pain shooting down my legs. I was paralyzed a few times, rushed into the emergency room. My neck and shoulders were constantly tight and uncomfortable. But when I started writing my books and I was kind of looking at my history, I realized that it started a lot earlier than that. I had chronic cystitis, like urine infections, as a small child. My mother was a children's nurse, and she just, they could never find anything wrong. And she would get so frustrated, she didn't know what to do with me. She'd stick me in a cold bath in the middle of the night. I'm screaming in pain. I had chronic allergies, starting from about 4 or 5 years old. I couldn't breathe in the summer, like my sinuses and eyes were burning, and my school bag was like a pharmacy going through high school with injections and inhalers and pills. And then when I started college, the asthma started. And then when I started working, in the movie business, the IBS started, and then the chronic back pains. And it's funny, it wasn't until I sat down and I kind of made a record of all these things, I thought, oh my gosh. I never thought of myself as a sick person. It was just like things you have to deal with, allergies and, back pain. Everybody gets that, right? And so when you're right, when I started writing the books, they're not autobiographical, but I do use a lot of the stuff that I went through and the circumstances I found myself in. So as much as the characters are made up, they're kind of based on either on my own experience or clients, and doctors that I've worked with over the years. So yeah, it's certainly been a journey.
Hmm. Did you work on Babe too? Was that one of the movies that you actually worked on?
Yes, that's what we got the Academy Award for. I did what's called animatronics. So and people often ask me, how did you go from doing special effects to, working with people with chronic pain? So my cute answer is that my job in Hollywood, I mean, all of Hollywood really, is about convincing you that this illusion is real.
Hmm.
And my job particularly was I became known for making copies of real animals. So for example, if a story like Babe has talking animals in it, or the animal has to do something and animals aren't allowed to do or shouldn't do, then we would make a copy of exactly that animal, not just any dog, but that dog. And it would cut from the real animal to my puppet, and you won't know the difference. So when I tell people I made puppets for Babe, they go, there's no puppets in that movie. And I'm like, well, does your dog talk? Right? So, when you watch a movie, you're suspending your disbelief for like an hour and a half. And you start thinking that animals can talk, or people can fly, or, and so my abilities and skills at special effects are nothing compared with the special effects that our minds can produce and convince us of all kinds of things. I mean, we've all fallen for stories that our heads are creating, about our lives or our circumstances or ourselves, and we fall for it. And I think pain is probably one of the most clever special effects, because it's not actually happening in the body, it's happening in the brain. And this is what I started finding out as I started researching, writing my books.
Hmm. It's so interesting that the mind creates our reality so powerfully. And we need that suspension of disbelief a little bit to enjoy the movie. But
Yeah.
if it's too much, if we kind of get lost in it, we can run screaming out of the theater. Like if a man wielding a knife comes at the screen, we're gonna run out. And what was really interesting to me is you said that pain is not in the body. It's created from the mind. And in your book, there was a really important detail that I feel like I picked up on, and that was when pain becomes chronic, it actually changes from I forgot what center of the brain you said, but it was one of the brain centers to the emotional center.
Mhm. Yeah,
And that's important.
yeah, yeah. Because pain, like if they were to brain, brain map and look in your brain and like say you, I don't know, just but cut your thumb, it's going to show up here. It's called the prefrontal cortex. It's the front of the brain, and that's where they would expect, regular pain to show up. If you hurt yourself, you're recovering from a surgery or a burn or something, that's where it's going to show up. And this particular piece of research I found, which is actually called shape-shifting pain, because what the researcher found was that when people have, an injury and as it starts to heal, it will melt away, it won't show up in this part of the brain anymore. But for chronic pain people, it's showing up back here in the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain. And then for people who are, their injury may be healing, but they're getting anxious, they're getting worried about it, it shifts from this part of the brain to that part of the brain, and it starts showing up at the back. And when I discovered this, and I actually wrote to the researcher who was doing this research at Chicago University, and I said to her in the email, I said, I I've seen that we're always feeling our thinking. Would you say your research backs that up? And she wrote back to me and she said, well, those aren't my words, but yeah, you're kind of right. I'm like, yeah, there you go. We're always feeling unthinking. And when I started hearing that from three principles teachers, when I came across three principles of, like, it's getting on for 10 years now, I think. I think when I heard that, the teachers what they were pointing to is that we're feeling our thinking in our moods, like a moody teenager, or, our moods are going up and down, and that's a direct result of the quality of our thinking. And I still believe that's true. But I think for some of us, we're feeling our thinking in our bodies, and it's showing up as, back pain or IBS or migraines, allergies, skin problems, food intolerances, infertility. There's endless ways that it can start kind of manifesting in a physical issue. And most of the people I talk to, work with, they've done the rounds of all the doctors and the specialists and the alternative treatments, and they're often told there's actually nothing wrong, which is more frustrating, causes more stress and more anxiety. And then that's when I started seeing the connection that the emotional part of the brain is producing what I now see as an alarm system. It's like when we get these physical issues, that it's actually an alarm going off trying to get our attention.
About 2 years ago, that alarm system was blaring in me. And I had this experience where I was a weight loss coach, and I was putting more and more pressure on myself to feel okay, to have a lot of energy, to be my best self.
Mhm.
And the more pressure that I put on myself, the worse I felt in my body. I started to have a foot problem where I would have pain in the ball of my foot. I started to have a little bit of indigestion. And I didn't get it because I was this super health nut, weight loss coach. I understood all of the different nutrients, and yet I was struggling with it. And it got so bad because I was becoming more and more stressed out. The fear was building, the anxiety was building. And it got to the point where I would eat, and it was like eating glass. It was so painful. I had acid reflux and was pacing at 2 in the morning. So yes, this very much applies to how I was using my mind
Mhm.
and how it was showing up in my body.
Yeah.
And we do it so innocently. And that's the hard part. A lot of times we don't even realize how we're using our minds. It seems like we're just responding
Mm.
to what's showing up.
Mhm.
But we can get lost in this tangle of fear and anxiety and upset that just brings our body into a lower state where it's not able to recover. Your body wants to recover. It
Mhm.
wants to make you feel good, but it can't if
Yeah.
it thinks that we're in an emergency mode all of the time.
Yeah, I've seen that there is a very clear connection to me now between digestive and gut issues and and stress. You know, and it's not just like, oh, you know, you're stressed, so your stomach hurts. There's an actual mechanism, you know, that's affected here. So I trained as a trauma counselor many years ago because after all my experiences, you know, the violence in my 20s, that's kind of the work I was doing in between movies. I would work as a, you know, volunteer as a trauma counselor. And what I learned was that the fight or flight response, you know, it's designed to last for about 20 minutes because in 20 minutes you should be able to get, you know, out of the burning house, climb a tree to get away from the tiger, you know, find the fire exit, whatever it is, you know, we need to do to get to safety. And then all that adrenaline and cortisol and glucose melt, as it were, dissipates out the body. And then by 72 hours later, we're ready to face another emergency. That's kind of how it works. And I remember when I was learning this, I was thinking, yeah, but my clients aren't sitting in stress and anxiety for 20 minutes. They're sitting in stress and anxiety for 2 hours, 4, 8, 18 hours a day. You know, and I remember telling one woman this, and she said, I felt like that since I was 10 years old. You know, and we might not be in absolute crisis all the time, but there's kind of like this river of, you know, river of stress going along in the background, you know. And I find that chronic pain people are often, I mean, obviously this is a generalization, but we're often perfectionists. And perfectionists in a way, not in the OCD way where we've got to have everything, you know, correctly, you know, lined up or in its right place. I mean, we like that, but it's not so important. But I think the perfectionism that shows up with chronic pain people is more about how we notice when things are wrong or they're not in their right place or it should be like this. It shouldn't be like that. We can see the more efficient way to do things or the right way to do things. Now, if you have that mindset going on all the time, it's quite stressful because, you know, I don't know about you, but I was constantly monitoring, supervising, checking anything and everything, people's behavior, how they park their car, you know, how they spend their money, how I could have done it better, I should have done it better. And all of that is kind of sending a danger message to the brain because our brains don't speak English, right? Or French or Spanish or any other language. And it's stuck in this little box called the skull. So it has to rely on your five senses for information. So here it is trying to make sense of the information it's getting from our five senses. And we're sending all these, you know, messages like this is wrong and that's wrong. And the brain speaks the language of safety and danger. So if we're monitoring, supervising, noticing everything all day long that's wrong, that's going to go in the danger box. It certainly doesn't go in the safety box because it, you know, I would walk into a social situation and like I didn't feel safe. And and it took me a long time to realize that that was anxiety. I just thought it was your fault or whoever I'm with, you know, it's their fault that I don't feel good. So what I learned about the stress response is it's really an amazing system that works on a lot of wisdom. And the wisdom is kind of manifests as efficiency. Because if you're having to run for your life, then there's certain things that kind of become a luxury, like making babies or digesting your lunch, right? Because if you're, running for your life, then digesting lunch is really takes up energy, and we haven't got time for that because we've got to get you, out of this dangerous situation. And so what it does is it actually shuts down the digestive system. So in an emergency situation, obviously that's a temporary thing to, conserve energy. But if we're, excuse me, if we're in kind of a crisis mode or a minor stress mode a lot of the day, that means our digestive system is shut down for a lot of the day. Now, the problem is then we get hungry and we put food in like you described. And that's why it feels like broken glass, or it feels like we're allergic to everything, because then it's like you're putting food into a system that is on strike. It doesn't, like the intestines aren't doing the right peristalsis movements. I'm not a doctor, but I've learned all this stuff. And there aren't the right enzymes in the stomach to digest stuff. And so then we get bloating, we get cramps, we get, IBS. And then the food intolerances, and people are thinking it's the food that's causing this, or it's the, something wrong with. And when you start to see that it's the, like we often talk about going further upstream, when I started seeing that it was my state of mind that was putting my stress response into activity, and a kind of regular, kind of constant activity of trying to protect me. No wonder it wasn't working well, because we weren't designed to sustain that level of stress for those amount of hours, day in, day out, year after year. And that's why people get sick. So I mean that's how I understand the digestive system issue now. Does that make sense with what you were experiencing?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it wasn't until I relaxed
Mm,
that I started to be okay. And that took a long time. The other interesting thing, I'm also a body worker. So I am a flexologist. I'm going into a massage program right now. And this is reflected in that. One of the things that I learned is that pain is actually a guess from the brain. It's a guess based off of those signals, the chemicals going on in your
mhm,
body that can be caused by a lot of different things,
mhm,
not necessarily injury.
mhm,
And so it is a best guess, and it can be upregulated like you were talking about. We can focus on it. We can bring it into that emotional limbic system. And
mhm.
then that just creates this cycle. A really interesting detail too, even with that place of being in that sympathetic nervous system versus the parasympathetic. Sympathetic is we need to activate, we need to be on defense, we need to run, we need to escape or freeze or fight.
Mhm.
When that's activated, your breathing actually changes.
Yeah.
So your breathing becomes that becomes a lot more. You're also breathing up here in your chest, and there are muscles that are connected to your neck, from your neck to your rib cage, from your scapula to your rib cage. And all of those muscles are now used for breathing. So when people are like, my neck is killing me, oh my gosh. And I work with a couple of clients like that. And we fix the breathing, we fix that sympathetic versus parasympathetic state. We relax how they're using their mind.
Mhm.
The neck issues tend to go away.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why my neck and shoulders, it makes perfect sense. My neck and shoulders were sore all the time. Like there were certain points, oh, like I had hairdressers who would say to me, gosh, your shoulders are very tight. I'm like, yes, just it's always like that. And I always believed it was because of the neck injury. Like, I, quite a serious impact in my neck and shoulders. And I couldn't even rotate this arm very well for many years. And I just believed it was because of the injury. And then that's what, medical people, the chiropractors and the osteopaths would tell me. When I'd give them a list of all my injuries, they go, oh, well, that's why. But what you just described makes so much sense, because I think I was always breathing very shallowly. And the way I kind of learned about the breathing thing was, if you have a surprise or a shock, it could be a good one, like a birthday or something, but we always breathe in, right? We breathe in when we're surprised. But if you've just had, a big meal, like big Thanksgiving dinner, and you sit on the sofa and you go, ah, right? We breathe out. So as a trauma counselor, I was taught to, if people are in a panic attack or, catatonic or some kind of, really extreme situation, that you want the out breath, the relaxing one, like the parasympathetic, I can never say those words, those words to, you always want the out breath to be longer to trick the nervous system into calming down. And then people can think more clearly and then they're coming back to, being present. But yeah, it's fascinating when you start seeing how all these things are connected. And I think that's why my pain went away, is because, like you said, when the mind slows down, my body didn't need to scream at me anymore. And it had been screaming for a long time. It was exhausting. Yeah.
And that's kind of the insidious thing about this, is that, like you're pointing to, we can get used to, adapt to this constant level of tension and pain, not just in our bodies, but in our minds as well. And that kind of becomes our default state when it's really not. Like kids, their default state is one of relaxation and play and excitement, and they recover from injuries really, really well. Maybe that's because they're growing up and their bodies are forming, but I think a big part of that is they're not using their minds in this way that takes them out of their physical and emotional wellness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think what you point to is that wellness is inside of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And you try and share that with people so that they can find it. They've been just kind of covering it up.
Yeah, I really believe that's true. In fact, when I started doing this kind of work, I wanted to see if I could recreate what had happened in me in other people. So I did, I guess you could call them case studies. I put an ad on my local Facebook group and I asked for volunteers for a new pain relief program. And I was making it up as I was going along. And it's funny when I think about it now, I decided to I chose 5 volunteers and I gave them all like this 10-hour program I came up with, which it wasn't until afterwards I realized that's 50 hours of my time. I'm glad I didn't think it through beforehand, else I might not have done it. So I chose these 5 people more because they're, working out 10 hours, 2 people's schedules to get together is quite tricky. So I chose them more because their availability rather than their physical stuff. But there was a range of, I think there was a couple of knee pains, there was a back pain, there was an IBS, So see how I'm describing these people as their diagnosis or their pain conditions, which is interesting because at the end of me talking to each of them for this 10 hours and describing, how pain works and how the 3 principles are related to the mind-body connection. One of the things they all said to me in the feedback was that they loved the fact that I talked to them as a person and not a diagnosis. because they also, because they'd all tried lots of other things, traditional, medicine and alternative stuff as well. And they'd all kind of, their identity had become like the shoulder pain or the, the IBS, knee pain in clinic, in the clinic, like there's the 9 o'clock, shoulder pain. It's like they had just become these appointments and these diagnoses. And what I think was different was that as a three principles practitioner, I was talking to them as a human, not just as a human being, but that they had health, that the health was there. Yes, they might it got into, might have had an injury, they might have gotten into some, a habit of a pain situation. And they might have even got into, like you were saying, it's also, like psychological habits and pain. But underneath all that misunderstanding, everyone has health. And like that's why I love the blue sky analogy. Like the blue sky is always there. It might get covered up by clouds or a storm or airplane going through or, but like I love, like when I fly from London, it might be like grey and rainy and you've got like, Heathrow, and then you go up and it's like, the plane is shaking, it's going through the clouds, and then there's blue sky. Right? The blue sky is always there, even when we can't see it. It's not like you have to order it from Amazon after a storm's passed, right? So I know when I'm talking to someone, whether they're in physical pain or they're, caught up in emotional stuff, they're caught up in stories or trauma, whatever it is that they think is the problem. Underneath that illusion, they have health. And even a body that's, like mine was damaged at a certain point. It had recovered, but there was damage. Sometimes I talk to people who are, have physical. I have a client right now who's paraplegic, and he can't feel anything from his chest down, but he can feel chronic pain. It's fascinating. So his health is still there, and his body might not be working well because of an accident he had in his early 20s, but it's amazing how the chronic pain comes and goes because it's been created by his mind, and it's fascinating. Yeah, we all have well-being. It does not go away. It just gets covered up. Yeah.
The other interesting thing is that I think a lot of people are wanting to fix the content, like how it's showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's showing up as knee pain or neck pain or indigestion.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot of specialists, and they're all amazing. They're doing a wonderful job, and they're doing what makes sense to them, and they've been trained in the medical system that focuses on these specific individual parts, and it's great because then you can learn a lot of detail about that and
Yeah.
become really, really good and specified. But it also sounds like that there's something behind, something at the root, something systemic that's going on for these people, where this is kind of how it's showing up.
Mm.
Like George Pransky had a metaphor of like a car, that every car of the different makes and models, they all have different weaknesses. Like some of them, one of the belts is going to go out first. Or some of them, the transmission is going to go out first. That's just kind of the weakness of the car.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're really caring for the car, that doesn't show up. If you are in that sympathetic and the parasympathetic state, that weakness, that thing that usually shows up for you, that's kind of like the first thing that's going to show up. That is not going to show up. And if it does, I think what you're pointing to, if it does, that's actually a sign that you're adding a little bit of extra wear and tear. with how you're using your mind and how you're using your body.
That's a great analogy. I really, really like that. Yeah, it makes so much sense. And I can actually give you an example
Yeah.
that kind of proves that. Um, like when I came across the three principles, I got very excited about it. But because I saw truth and I was really fascinated and wanted to become a practitioner, I didn't get into it to make my pain go away. I I didn't think my pain could go away. So just to be clear with anybody's listening, the three principles are not a cure for pain. They're not a cure for anything, right? They're an understanding of how it all works. So my pain went away as a kind of blessing, as it were, as like a side effect, a good one, as my thinking slowed down and I started getting more and more insights that like I said, my body didn't need to scream it anymore. So I describe myself as being pain-free for, pretty much since the beginning. My allergies took a little bit longer to go away, but they've pretty much gone now. I mean, compared with what it used to be like. And but when I say pain-free, I can have the occasional twinge. So like you were saying, like sometimes it shows up. And the great thing now is that because I recognize it for what it is, if my back starts to get a bit sore or my gut starts to get a bit angry, I'm not going like, oh my gosh, it's come back, or like I have to, running to the hospital or whatever. I just know it's like my body's talking to me and it's telling me to slow down. And I experienced this. I live in Israel, right? So I'm in Jerusalem. And around October 7th, obviously we had no clue what was happening. It was very frightening. And I kind of, as a trauma counselor, and I've been trained as a first responder, that kind of situation, I kind of thrive in those kind of situations. I'm kind of helping other people how to handle it. And I don't usually watch much news, but I'd say a week to 10 days after that initial horrendous event, I started noticing my back was getting a little bit sore. And then my skin, like the backs of my hands were getting a bit itchy. And then the IBS was kind of like getting a little bit, and it was almost like uh it was funny. I think in musicals they call it reprise. Like, they like in the finale of the musical, you get to hear all the bits of all the songs that you've heard throughout the show. It was kind of like that. It was like all my mind body kind of chronic health issues I've had over the years, they all showed up just a tiny little bit. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm watching too much news. Now, I think it was understandable. I wasn't judging myself for that because of the situation we're in. I needed to know what's going on. But my body started letting me know I was probably a little bit too much. Come back, you're safe, So I stopped watching as much news and like discussing it with people, and it went away. It didn't turn into anything like it used to. Like in the past, it would have been like I'd been lying on the floor for 3 days, and like been like going off, calling the chiropractor for emergency appointments, get the heating pad, getting all the stuff that I used to have to deal with all these things that would, crop up all the time. I just needed to hear it or feel it just a tiny bit. And it's weird. It's kind of like the principles have taught me how to be sensitive in a good way. Because in the past I was very sensitive, like emotionally, like, needy or like me or, like that kind of sensitive, like, hurt my feelings kind of sensitive. And now the sensitivity is, I really like being in a good mood. I like feeling healthy. And it's not that I'm frightened of being in a bad mood or frightened of the pain, but why would I want to go there if I don't have to? And so the sensitivity is like, it's just like a little tap on the shoulder now, careful. What are you up to? And like I said, it's not a judgment. I think being in a war zone is, it's understandable that you'd be a little bit tense, but it's actually been, my physical stuff just popped up that few days, just a little bit of each thing, and then it went away. And I'm really grateful for the understanding to know that's what it was. It was wisdom just tapping me on the shoulder. Careful, yeah.
Yeah, and there's an element that I want to speak to in that because I think that some people might hear that, oh, I'm creating my pain, is what I'm
Yeah.
hearing, and therefore it's all my fault, and therefore I need to judge myself and that just creates another layer of guilt that's not helpful.
Yeah.
A part of the understanding that we explore, the three principles understanding, really focuses on the innocence of how we use our mind. And we're going to use our mind in a way that makes sense to us at the time. And it might make sense to us to get really stressed out about that. But when we understand the system more, like you were talking about, we're going to be able to hear the pain in a new way. It's going to make sense to react in a different way. And instead of reacting in a way that would perpetuate the pain or kind of focus on it so that it would go and create a cycle and twirl
Yeah.
around and
Yeah.
you'd get all upset about it and then have to go to a chiropractor 4 times in the day. You saw it as that signal to slow down. And that is really, really helpful to see it for what it really is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you make a good point because I have sometimes, described all this to people and then they'll hear it as that they're creating it themselves. And I've kind of it's not been a deliberate decision, but I've kind of stayed away from, I mean, I've worked with a few people who have with cancer, for example, but I really don't want people to feel that they've done this to themselves. And I know there are certain belief systems that say, like your cancer, for example, is created by, negative thinking. I don't know. I don't know anybody can say that for yes or no for sure. I mean, I do think state of mind has a lot to do with how we, how we are, how we experience life, and how we feel. But I actually the one person I can think of who I did work with cancer, it was a lung cancer, I remember now, and um she was told by the doctors that it was a certain kind of cancer they didn't have much hope for, which was really sad. And so she was in hospital and in and out of hospital, and thank God eventually they did find something that helped her. But on this journey together, I remember this one particular session. I think I got more out of this than she did, because which often happens, right? As a practitioner. But she was she was kind of exhausted and frustrated, and she said, "I'm so sick of being a sick person." Like that had become her identity. She was in and out of hospitals all the time, IVs, injections, chemo, medicines, doctor's appointments. It's like her regular life had disappeared, and she was just all day long being a sick person and dealing with it. And then she had an insight, and she said, "I just realized that my well-being can't get sick." I was like, yes. Right? And I took it a step further and said, yeah, consciousness can't get sick. So there was the physiological stuff she was having to deal with, and it was, uncomfortable and frustrating and exhausting. And so eventually they did find something that helped her. But the interesting thing was that she hired me not just to help her with the physical stuff, because she thought she wasn't going to make it. She hired me to help her with her relationships because she didn't want to, pass on having bad relationships. And so we started talking a lot more about the relationship stuff. And and so was there a connection between that and, her getting better? I don't know. But I think the more we look in this direction and the more insights we had, when she saw that consciousness can't get sick, like her whole face lit up, right? Maybe that did something for her metabolism and her, molecular structures. I don't know. but it can't be wrong, right? To be in a better mood. And I think, I've a few little sayings, and one of them is never underestimate the healing power of a good mood, right? Being in a good mood is like whatever's going on with us physically, the better state of mind I'm in is always going to make it an easier experience, which then our nervous system is like that too. Yeah.
When the great part about that is that's who we really are, is the wellness, not just physical wellness, not just mental wellness, but also emotional wellness, connection. And that's such a beautiful thing to see, to really see, to really hear. A lot of what we focus on is based off of insight. And you might be listening to this and be like, well, that's nice for them. They can think that, or you can hear it in a way that's not at a deep level. You just kind of like, oh, okay, wellness, that's great. Okay. Moving on with my life. And then, like, you heard the truth, you said earlier. You heard the truth in the principles. And that's what created the transformations, almost this resolution of pain as a side effect of that. And that's what we're looking toward as we share this podcast with you, the listener. And that's what we invite you to look toward. What if it is true? Play around with the idea of it. And pick it up, put it down, pick it up again.
Right.
Maybe there's something there that you're not seeing the true depth of. Really explore.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a beautiful invitation. I think that the way you just described that is like it's a really beautiful invitation to people to explore, like, our well-being. Like we've said, it's already there. We've just been looking in the wrong direction. Yeah.
Covering it up without meaning to. But and we all do it. Like, I still do it. I'm sure you still do it. So it's so human. It's so okay. It's not a problem. And the other thing that I really heard in this is that just how temporary things are too. Pain, even though it seems like it's gonna last forever and my foot is gonna be in pain. I was like having trouble walking. I couldn't even walk. And I thought, oh man, it's getting worse and worse and worse. It's gonna last forever. But to see that it's a temporary creation of the mind, and that, like you pointed to, what's behind that is something that's untouched by any experience of pain.
Yeah. We often say that we can never be broken and we don't need fixing. And I've been saying that to clients for many years, and I thoroughly believed it. And then I had an insight as to why that's true, And it was kind of like what you just described, that there's this space before our thoughts start forming into the content and the stories and this never going to go away. And I've done all this work, and, saw all these doctors, and I had all those stories too. And before all that noise, there's this beautiful, quiet place. And that quiet place, like you said, is who we are. And that's what can't be broken. Like, yes, I can have a broken bone, I can have a surgery, I can have an infection, in my physical body, but my body isn't really who I am. You could lose a limb, God forbid, but you're still you. So when I saw like, that's why we can't be broken, is because we're that formless energy, that space, that, mystical, spooky, whatever you want to call it, that beautiful, formless energy. That's who we really are. And that can't be broken. That's what we're pointing to. And I think that just gave me another layer of, or maybe another layer went away actually. It was more of a clarity, because sometimes we can say things and I absolutely meant it, but now I understand why it's true. And that kind of gave me a deeper understanding of what we're pointing to, the truth behind it. Sure. Yeah.
And it's cool that we can kind of drop into that at any time.
Mm-hmm.
Sid Banks would say that a brand new experience of life is a thought away.
Mm-hmm.
So we can drop into that. We can let go of all of the conditioning, all of the history, all of the past. That was another big theme of your book, I feel like, was to see that the past is a memory, that it's just a memory carried through time. It's not real right now. It was a real experience before.
Mm-hmm.
You had a real experience of trauma and of being mugged. And I had a real experience of pacing at 2 a.m,
Mm-hmm.
of almost being admitted to a mental institution. But that is just a temporary memory that we can bring in and we can
Mm-hmm.
hold on to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's why we're not broken. It's because it's not happening now.
Mm.
It's past, which is such a relief. So I was exhausted trying to fix all that stuff, with the journaling and the meditation. And I say it's not there's anything wrong with those things. It's just I was trying to fix something that wasn't broken. Yeah. So yes.
I can't tell you how many notebooks I filled up of affirmations.
Mm.
Oh man, and I was just trying so hard to fix myself. And I love that you said we're never broken and we don't need fixing. That was such a relief to me, and it sounds like it was a relief to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't spend hours trying to, change how I feel, change my thinking. All that work I was doing before, it was exhausting, which is one of the reasons I think that my body was screaming at me, because I was trying to do something that wasn't necessary, and or trying to get somewhere, when really it was, inside all the time. So yeah.
Cool. That just it resonated with me so much that it's just like, cool. Yeah. Mm. Well, I so appreciate you coming on today. Hannah was so generous to invite me into her community where she coached me on my business, and we had a really wonderful conversation. So I definitely recommend checking out her community. I also recommend checking out her books. I've read Painless. I'm going to get some of your other books. I'm going to get a copy of Beyond Diagnosis and read through that. I'll be continuing to explore some of your work. Is there anything that you would like to share that you have coming up, or a way that people can reach out to you?
Yeah, thank you. So I actually have two websites. One is my name, chanastudley.com, and that's where you can find a lot of the pain stuff. And I'm in the middle of recording an online course right now, which I think I've been meaning to do this for years, but just putting all the information, in one place. Um, I One of the things I'm very excited about is that the Beyond Diagnosis book has been the data from that book, which is where I collected over 60 stories of recovery from all kinds of mental health diagnoses. Everything from psychosis to bulimia to OCD to PTSD of people who've recovered. And we've turned it into a research paper, me and Jack Pransky and Tom Kelly, two PhD amazing guys. And it's submitted right now to the APA, the American Psychological Association, for their journal for peer review. And so I'm very excited about that. It takes a while for that process so hopefully in the summer we'll hear, if it's been edited and accepted, and so to have a published paper based on, on this is it's going to be a really, really exciting day when when we hear about that. So, and I've just started working on my next book. It's funny, this book has been half written since the beginning, so for about 5-6 years now. And it's about overdiagnosis of ADHD and drug company corruption. So it's gonna, might be a bit controversial for some, but I find these topics fascinating because there's so much people are suffering, and it's, my books are stories, most of them. So to get this kind of information that we're talking about and get it out in the form of a story, I think people find that very helpful. So some of the things I'm working on right now. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, I'm gonna keep tabs on you for sure. Really, really cool stuff. And yeah, it was so interesting. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when I was a kid and ADHD. And I don't have any medication right now for those. So
Well,
I know. Yeah.
yeah.
And life is awesome. Life is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, your wisdom, your presence,
Yeah.
and your sharing.
It's been a pleasure. I always know I've had a good time because my cheeks start hurting, and it's like because I've been smiling so much. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Mhm.
Hopefully no pain in the cheeks later tonight. We'll have to rub them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the Releasing Mental Tension podcast with Rich Life. I'm on a mission to help people release their mental tension because I know that it helps them to be more capable, creative, and compassionate human beings. And I need your help. Please like, comment, subscribe. If you'd like more resources, visit richliferealization.com. Your vibrant life is a single thought away.